They say you don't need to be the loudest person in the room, just the one who stays longest after everyone else has left. That was always my approach: quiet, reliable, unremarkable in the way people don't look twice at, but somehow always find in the room when the deadline hits. My name's Jacob Elwin. I'm 38. I used to work at an architectural design firm just outside Seattle, mid-sized, lots of reclaimed wood and aggressive lighting. The kind of place where they tell you to own your creative space while scheduling 3 meetings a day to ask what you're working on. I'd been there for almost 6 years, worked my way up from draftsman to lead concept designer. I wasn't flashy, not the guy posting my renders on LinkedIn every time the sun hit right, but I delivered. I mentored interns, took the tough clients, helped bring in 2 of our biggest municipal contracts. And then came Liam. Fresh out of grad school, blazer sleeves rolled halfway up, hair that took longer to style than his morning meetings. He joined as a strategic hire, which in plain English meant his uncle sat on our board. At first, I didn't mind him. He asked a lot of questions, seemed genuinely interested, even shadowed me on a few site visits. I figured he was green, not dangerous. But there's a difference between watching to learn and watching to take. And Liam, he wasn't watching me. He was watching what he could use. The first time Liam crossed a line, it was almost invisible. We had been pitching a small urban library project. Nothing flashy, but high community impact, lots of flexible use space. I'd put together a concept proposal based on natural light flow and modular seating, blending passive sustainability with an open access aesthetic. A mouthful, I know, but it worked. 3 days before the client meeting, Liam offered to help clean up my deck. Said he'd run it through a more polished version of our new template. I said sure, why not? The morning of the pitch, we both presented. I went first, walking through the design and development rationale. The client nodded, engaged, taking notes. Then Liam got up, smiling wide, and said, "Let me show you how this could scale across your other locations." And he proceeded to show them my exact concept, adjusted slightly, framed as part of his urban design capstone work. The language, the renders, even the spatial ratios, all mine. I watched it happen in real time, and I didn't say a word, because in rooms like that, when someone younger says something with confidence and someone older says, "That was my idea," guess who looks insecure? We got the project. Liam was congratulated. I was thanked quietly, like a plumber after the leaks already stopped. At first, I tried to let it go, told myself it was a one-off, maybe even accidental. He was new. Maybe he didn't realize how closely he'd mirrored my work. But then it happened again, and again. Not full theft, just strategic redirection. Comments I'd made in meetings became Liam's insights. Prototypes I left in the shared drive were suddenly team concepts that he had helped shape. Little things, shavings, but I could feel the sculpture of my credibility shrinking with every slice. By the time we hit the next promotion cycle, Liam was being floated as a fresh voice and leadership material. Me? I was told I was too good where I was to move just yet. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being boxed in, and Liam was the one drawing the corners. I didn't confront Liam. That's what he probably expected. A sharp email, a meeting behind closed doors, a half-angry, half-defeated "what are you doing, man?" speech that he could deflect with a smile and a paper trail full of plausible deniability. I gave him none of that. Instead, I started listening more closely than before. I paid attention to how he operated in meetings, how he always spoke second, never first, how he waited until the idea was on the table and then repackaged it with bigger words and a sharper tone. It wasn't brilliance, it was choreography. So I gave him ideas, specifically curated ones, projects with subtle flaws, concepts that looked sleek but would unravel under actual budget modeling or spatial testing. I floated one of them during a Friday brainstorm, a vertical mixed-use model for a redevelopment project in Tacoma. I knew the city wouldn't approve vertical signage above a certain height on that block, and the zoning code had a setback clause that would kill the design in review. But I made it sound bold, clean, modern. Liam latched onto it immediately.
That's the kind of thinking we need to elevate the pitch.
I can refine that and draft a version for Monday. Go for it, I said. I stayed late that night, made sure the backup model, the one with the realistic zoning, was finalized and time-stamped on our internal system. It included full source references, internal only, but traceable. Then, I waited. Monday's pitch went great, at least on the surface. By Wednesday, we got the call. City planning rejected the model outright. And just like that, a six-figure proposal we were shortlisted for got passed to a competitor. The leadership team wasn't angry. Not yet. These things happen, but they took note. A mark went on Liam's record, not public, not spoken, but real. And I had more than just marks in mind. I had leverage. Because while Liam was busy pushing to be the next creative director, I was already having lunch with someone who'd once held the title. Madeline Chen. She'd left the firm 2 years ago after what they called strategic misalignment, which meant she'd disagreed with a few board members too publicly. We had kept in touch, quietly, respectfully. She was now consulting on her own, small firm, good clients, quiet ambition, and she had an offer for me. I'm rebuilding something, not a competitor, a counterweight. You interested in having your name on a door instead of someone else's deck? I didn't say yes, not yet. Because I wasn't ready to leave, not until the room remembered who built it. Reputation doesn't change overnight, especially when you're the quiet one, when people have spent years seeing you as reliable, consistent, background. They don't unsee that easily, even when someone flashier starts making mistakes. But mistakes are how the shift begins. Over the next month, I stayed steady. I didn't undermine Liam directly, I just let his habits speak for themselves. When he reused phrasing from an earlier pitch, I let it ride. When he referenced a zoning ordinance incorrectly, I corrected it casually in the next meeting. When a vendor followed up on a delay he caused, I forwarded the email with context, politely worded, CCing leadership. Nothing dramatic, just data. And leadership, to their credit, started noticing. Quietly. I could feel it in the way they turned when I spoke, the way they waited when I paused. Then came the real opportunity, a regional project from Cascadia Co-Living, a green housing initiative expanding into mid-sized cities. Big budget, high visibility. We were one of 3 firms shortlisted for the final presentation. The team asked me to lead the design direction. Liam offered to co-present. I smiled. Of course. He didn't realize that by saying yes, I was giving him the mic in front of the wrong room, a room that would expect more than flash. I spent 3 weeks preparing, building a model that was honest, practical, and beautifully modest. Not flashy, just quietly excellent. Our team knew the client's past builds, their pain points, their values. I designed into that, not around it. Liam, meanwhile, added flare slides, buzzwords, renderings with angles that looked better than they built. The day of the presentation, I opened strong, walked through the philosophy, the real-world application, the numbers. Then Liam took the middle third and overpromised on delivery timelines and lead certifications the client knew weren't feasible. When we wrapped, the client said, "We appreciate honesty, always have. We've had firms sell us visions. We're looking for someone to build reality." They shook my hand last. A week later, we got the contract. The leadership team CC'd me on the internal announcement. Liam's name wasn't mentioned. After the Cascadia win, things got quiet, in the best way. The kind of quiet where emails come with fewer exclamation marks, and meetings start with questions pointed your way. I wasn't a background player anymore, not in tone, not in posture, not in presence. Liam sensed it. His smiles became tighter, his interjections shorter. He started volunteering for less and micromanaging more, a sure sign someone feels the ground shifting beneath their feet. Leadership still hadn't said anything directly, but they didn't have to. And then, 3 weeks later, I was called into a third-floor office I'd never been invited to before. One of the partners, Diane, greeted me with her usual clipped warmth and gestured toward a chair across from her desk. "Jacob, we're considering a slight reorg." She said it like a dentist says, "pressure," before they drill. "We've been thinking about creating a dual-track structure under the creative director. Strategy and execution, 2 lanes, parallel authority. We'd want you to oversee execution." I nodded, once, calm. "That would put me on equal footing with Liam," I said. She hesitated, smiled without smiling. Essentially, yes. I paused, just long enough for it to register. Then I replied, "Actually, I've been interviewing." Her eyebrows lifted, just slightly. I didn't let it sit. "A small but promising firm. Partner-led, focused. They've offered me full creative control and equity." I told them I hadn't made up my mind. She nodded slowly, hands folding over one another. "What would make you stay?" I took a breath. "A title that reflects the work I already do, a salary that reflects the value I bring, and the authority to shape projects without ghostwriters." I didn't have to say Liam's name. She knew. 2 days later, I got everything I asked for. Liam was transitioned to a lateral role focused on client engagement, which meant he'd spend more time smoothing egos and less time in the decision room. I stayed another 6 months, long enough to stabilize the Cascadia contract, mentor a new team lead, and document the systems I'd rebuilt. Then, I handed in my notice. Not because I was running, but because the room remembered now. The last day at the firm felt strange in the best possible way. No drama, no goodbyes soaked in false affection, just quiet nods from people who had watched the tide turn and knew instinctively not to ask for the full story. I left behind clean handover notes, a fully built-out project archive, and a list of recommendations for promotions that didn't include Liam. He avoided me in the halls for weeks before I left. That was fine, because this wasn't about him anymore. Madeline's office was small, smaller than what I left behind, but it had light, real light, glass that looked out at the water. Not prestige glass, not status symbol skyline stuff, just honest space. And space was what I wanted. My title was principal designer, and I shared ownership of the new firm with her and one other partner. 3 of us, even footing, real decisions, no ghostwriters. We took on mid-scale civic work, schools, libraries, health clinics, projects that lasted, that mattered. My name was on every drawing that went out. My voice was in every room we pitched. One afternoon, I ran into someone from my old firm at a regional planning seminar. He asked politely what I was up to these days. I told him. He paused, then said, "You always had it in you. Just took the rest of us a while to see it." I nodded, smiled. But I didn't correct him, because he was wrong about one thing. It didn't take them time to see it. It took me time to stop waiting for them to. And when I finally did, that was the 3rd interview, the one where I sat across from myself and finally said yes.